zero waste, and climate issues, electrification, outings, and more. There's also an inland group for North County, and that starts in Vista and goes to Escondido, and they do a lot of things similar to our activities, as well as their very successful Wilderness Basics course, which is a great way to learn how to backpack safely and smartly. I know several people who've taken that class and everybody loves it. I'd like to start by introducing our executive board. We have Amelie Kathleen, just wave here. And Mark Jenny, you probably met him as you came in, back there. Paige DeCino. Attending virtually, our Harold Standifer and John Elton. The president of our e-board, Sally Prendergast, couldn't be here tonight, but she'd ordinarily be hosting this meeting. I'd also like to introduce the mayor of Oceanside, who's able to join us tonight, Esther Sanchez. And attending virtually is Dwight Warden, who is a Del Mar City Council member. Welcome, Dwight. Thank you for attending. Good to see you. I also would like to introduce Cindy and Roger Davenport. They are the co-chairs of the Oceanside team and the heart of our Oceanside team. Something I'd like to mention is that one of our big priority action items for the entire San Diego County chapter is the 30 by 30 effort. 30 by 30 is basically the global movement to preserve 30% of our key undeveloped lands and coastal waters by the year 2030. 30% is the minimum that we need to prevent the worst consequences of climate change, including widespread loss of species. And I'm sure you have heard this before, but it bears repeating. San Diego County is a biodiversity hotspot. In fact, our county is the most biodiverse of all counties in North America. So this is a key priority for the Sierra Club. And we would love to have more people involved in our 30 by 30 effort. So just contact us to get involved. I also wanted to mention the induction burner program. And some of you saw that on your way in here. I'm sure you've heard about the need to decarbonize our homes using electric appliances, because electricity is much cleaner now than plain old natural gas, which is not clean at all and never will be. Have you also heard about the toxic gases and carcinogens that are released when you use a natural gas stove in your home? Because 20% of childhood asthma in California is caused by our gas stoves in this state. So it's a health issue as well as an environmental issue. And I know I was kind of induction burner curious, like, I should try that. And lo and behold, Paige DeCino is one of our local contacts for a free loaner program. Anybody can take a induction burner and use it for a couple of weeks and get a feel for it, see if you like it before you invest in one. They're not real expensive, but hey, free is free. So why not try it? And there's info back there where the burner is, so that all you need is a website. You go on there and you make your reservation to borrow it. So Paige wanted to make a short announcement.
Yeah, I'm with the Carlsbad Sierra Club team, as is Mike McMahon somewhere. There he is. And on May 9th, our city council is going to get an update on their annual CAP report, climate action plan, and they're getting a report or a presentation from EPIC Environmental, I don't know, from whatever it stands for. Anyway, they work on CAPS a lot. They're going to give a presentation on building electrification. So our team has come up with a list of requests that we want to do on our updated CAP that should come back to council hopefully before the end of the year, maybe in the fall. We don't have a very strong CAP. It's very kind of weak and not very binding. So if you look back on the counter where you signed in, there's this little QR code. You can scan it. We've got a table of the things we want to ask for. And there's there's background information and references. And we really want everybody to either come to the meeting on May 9th and make a public comment or send in some written comments. So, written comments are pretty easy. So please make the effort to do that because it makes a lot of difference. So thanks.
Thank you, Paige. Well, it's time to introduce our first speaker, Eric Joyce. Eric Joyce was elected to represent Oceanside's District 1 in 2022, and he was endorsed by the Sierra Club in that election. Prior to the election, he served on Oceanside Unified School District's board, where he led on initiatives to rebuild underfunded schools, to update books and curriculum, and implement an innovative community school model in our most impacted schools. In the community, Councilmember Joyce volunteers with many local organizations working to fight homelessness, to curb gun violence, address food scarcity, and other community needs. He also served as the chair of the North San Diego County NAACP's committee to end the school to prison pipeline. He will discuss his approach to priority issues in Oceanside, including future development, environmental justice, and housing affordability. Please welcome Eric.
Thank you so much for the kind welcome. I'm Eric Joyce. I'm not used to the microphone thing. I'm used to screaming because I'm a teacher. So I'll try and do my best here and hold the mic. Yes, I appreciate that. And speaking of that, just really quickly, because I'm probably going to start talking to all these folks here. Just want to give you a shout out. Appreciate you being there. I've been in a lot of Zoom meetings, trying to hang in there. I'll try and be, I'll keep it to 20. All right. So I'm Eric Joyce. I'm a special education teacher in Encinitas Union School District, which is technically in Carlsbad, the city. I have a keen interest in the future of our region and our country and our world. And that's why I think we're here together today. And we're good on the mic? Okay. And I'm really excited to get the chance to work with you on all the strategy that we have around the environment. So I ran for council from the school board because I looked at what was happening in our city and I recognized a lack of cohesive leadership, and I wanted to be part of the change. I wanted to join Mayor Sanchez and the work that she's doing and find a pathway to bring forward all of the voices that have been working in our community, like Diane Nygaard, who have been advocating on behalf of those without voices, our climate, and the folks that live in our neighborhoods that are not typically found to be heard at councils. I ran a grassroots campaign. I walked the whole district myself. It's not as hilly as District 2, but it's got some hills. I think I ran that way because I want to govern that way. I want to be here where people can have conversations about the things that matter and build coalitions around the really long-term benefits of what it means to be a community. So a few of the things that I was asked to talk about are housing affordability and homelessness. We don't have enough time tonight. Frankly, it's an area that I have a unique perspective on our council because I am a renter in this city. I do understand the impacts of the rapidly escalating housing costs. When I see developments come before council, I just have a different lens than other council members. So we have to address a housing affordability from all angles if we want to sustain a multicultural and rich culture that we have here in Oceanside, which is one of the reasons so many of us love this city as it is. It's a bit of a unicorn. And I apologize to all those from the other cities, but Oceanside is the best. It really is. And so for me, I want to make sure that it is a place where my children have a place to live. If they want to go into public service like I have, thinking about teachers being able to afford homes in the future in this area, it's starting to become, if not already, a dream and not the reality. So we have to increase the stock. We have projects that come before us, and right now the council's policy on inclusionary affordable housing is at 10%. Hopefully this is recorded because that's criminally low. It needs to be addressed. Our city is a 30% low income city. So that means every project that's built at 10% affordability is a gentrifying force on our city. There's no other way. It's just not built for us. We have to preserve the housing that's in place that is affordable right now. So when you were talking about housing, it's so many different angles we have to be working the problem from, because we can't afford to build enough housing to be affordable. We also can't afford enough preservation. We have to do all of the things when it makes sense to do each of them. And then we need data. We need better data about who owns our houses. We get these wonderful articles from San Diego Union Tribune about the massive organizations that are buying up our housing stock. But the truth is, we don't really know. We don't have the data to make good decisions on that. So I know that this room is data driven. I can just assume it. I also assume for you, I told you I wouldn't forget you. You're on there. Everybody up there, still with me, you're data driven too. We need the data to make better decisions. So when it comes to housing, I'm a big advocate for collecting that data as well. Can we have smart growth in this city? It is inextricably linked to the idea of whether or not our housing is going to support the people that we're talking about. We are developing the smart growth and sustainable corridors plan, thanks to years and years of advocacy from folks that lived in this city, and thanks to a state that's catching up on priorities that should have been there a long time ago. We have citizens who are on board. We have people in our neighborhoods who are saying, yeah, that makes sense, because we've taken the time to have the conversations about where our housing should be. And we're starting to build a larger coalition. You're seeing it in other cities. You're seeing it in places like San Diego, where they stayed up all night last night protecting their tenants. I don't know if any of you saw that, but if I'm bleary-eyed, it's because I was watching intently. And when I say I ran, because I believe in our ability to make positive change as a local government. I really mean it. And when people are leading and doing things that are big and important, I'm paying attention, because I've got that in mind for our city too, and our region as well. That's why I'm so excited to be the alternate. And freshman council member gets alternate on CEA, which is a huge deal for Oceanside to be joining. Thank you to the mayor for her leadership on that. I'm an alternate, so I do get to go to the meetings. I get to stay informed. And every once in a while, when our mayor is pulled into really, really important things, I get to sit in and pinch hit. I'm also the alternate on NCTD, which, if you talk about housing, you can't not talk about transit. And so fighting for things like common sense improvements to our transit that make it more usable, that create placemaking around our transit. It's direly important. And we at NCTD, so I'm the nerdy alternate who's at all the meetings anyway. Even though I can't sit up there with the other board members, I'm sitting in the back and I'm giving them thumbs up, and I stay afterwards and we talk to them, and my staff members with me, because the work that they're doing right now is, again, that 10, that 20, that 30-year future on what this region looks like. The Sprinter, our Breeze buses carry more people than the Coaster. We have to be paying attention to it. It's not the beautiful one that goes along the beach, but we have people getting moved by transit right now for day-to-day tasks all the time. And we have to make it easier, and we have to make it more functional for them to use it if we want to really get the VMTs down and improve our carbon footprint. So the last thing that I was asked to kind of touch on is environmental justice. Okay, good. And again, we don't have time. I'm personally a runner. I ran the 800. Please don't ask me to run 800 right now. Now, I told my wife the other day, I said, I'm going to go for a jog. And she's like, oh, you're a jogger now, which is not cool because I'm super competitive. So, but I think I've fully transitioned just from a knees perspective, but I run, and I run around our city, and I run around District 1, and I can see environmental justice when I run. I can see neighborhoods that have tree canopy, and I can see neighborhoods that don't. I can feel the heat off the asphalt in the summertime when I run through the east side. That's an environmental injustice. The people that are most likely to be using, walking, and biking in those spaces are subject to the worst conditions. And we have to do better. We have to get more data about our tree canopy, and we have to make moves to actually address it. It's not a very complicated one. It just needs somebody to step in and push it along. You know, the gas burners were brought up, electrifying. Again, I'm a renter, I have a gas stove, and I have a child with asthma. These are all real things that affect people, and that people that are renting and don't have the economic freedom to make those choices necessarily do disproportionately suffer the impacts, and their children suffer the impacts, and then their children probably will too, unless we step in and break the cycle on these things. Along with that, creating safe bicycle and pedestrian pathways through our city is literally good for everything. This is probably one of the things I talked about the most when I was out, and everybody loves it. Nobody's against it. Making our city one that can be walked and bicycled is great for business. It's great for health. It's great for, you name it. There's nothing not in our purview that it's not good for. We have to start moving that direction much faster than we have been. We're behind the other cities, and just generally, we should be leading. Again, sorry everybody from the other cities, but we should be. We're the biggest city in North County, the third biggest in the county in general. And besides that, we should be leading. Look at this place. If we're going to make any real progress, we're not going to be able to rely on part-time council members and mayors. Sorry. We need full-time staffers, and we need commissions that are specifically working on these items in our city. This room right here is more than enough expertise to move us along in our goals for climate action. It's great to hear that Carlsbad's getting an update on their report. Having real conversations about your climate action plan is probably a good start too. I am the lucky beneficiary of coming in when there are very few voices on the dais talking about it. Unfortunately for our community, that's the case, but fortunately for our ability to get things done, there are a lot of options. I'm open to them. I'm excited about them. I hope that you'll work with me, and I appreciate you having me here tonight. We're going to open it up for questions and hopefully answers. Oh, yes. If you have questions, please raise your hand. Oh, awesome.
IRA and the BIL federal laws have been, that process has begun in terms of grants and rebates that are available for electrification and infrastructure?
That's a good question. I'm probably not the most qualified in this room to answer it, to be frank. Anyone else know the answer to that one?
The question was about the IRA, the tax credits, Roger, and I know you just recently had some of that information.
For electrification?
I know that the IRA restores the 30% tax credit for things like solar, also includes storage and upgrading electrical appliances. So you can get a lot of rebates now. They're also reinstating, we hear, the switches on program. And that will be a state program that provides cash for things like upgrading your electrical system so you can put in an electric heat pump water heater and that sort of thing, and solar. So there are a lot of things that we're waiting for them to happen. The tax credit is good, effective all this year. So anything you do is good for the 30%.
Awesome.
Cities, grants for cities, even infrastructure, things of that.
Well, cities can apply for grants. Yeah, cities can apply for grants through the IRA. Also, things like the Clean Energy Alliance, our
Yeah.
new utility that will be joining in Oceanside next April. So they can also apply for them. I think right now they have a shortage of grant writers in order to do it. So it's a bandwidth issue with that.
I didn't want to.
You could do so.
I'm just going to say a lot of those grant opportunities are just starting to roll out from the Inflation Reduction Act.
Good.
So I just saw one, actually went to a webinar this week on tree planting. And so there's great opportunities. I passed it on to the city staff. I'd actually sent the link to the webinar and encouraged them to go to it. Nobody attended it from the city, but I sent them the webinar recording of it. And we've been working real hard to try to get them to do that. So
Yeah.
One other comment I would make is that there's a very large pot of money in there specifically for low income housing.
Yeah. Oh, chat question. Well, now I can't. You have to click on the chat.
Yeah, I can either read it or it's from Dwight Warden, and he was asking to Eric, can you comment on Oceanside sea level rise plans and the status of what has been called the Ground Project? Grounds.
It is a growing project. Yeah, I can. So right now we are in phase 2. It was advanced, and we are seeking designs, worldwide designs and input from companies who are looking to do a sand retention system. And so, you know, the idea is that it's going to be something that is palatable to the Coastal Commission, that can pass, and that's how this company gets paid. So I look forward to seeing whatever's going to come out of it, but that's where we're at right now. They're going through the process, and it should come back to council in December is the timeline.
Thank you. A question I have is about staffing and specifically a sustainability coordinator. I know that other members of our city council have pointed out our demographic similarity to Vista and Escondido, and that they see that because of the similarity, that if they're doing it, it's a good thing. They have sustainability coordinators on staff.
Yes.
And so does San Marcos. We don't. And the staff, you mentioned the staff and putting some action in our climate action plan. How, do you have some ideas or some remarks about
I could.
getting somebody that can head up sustainability for our city?
Yes. Today we had our budget update and our council workshop on it, and new staffing was presented. And during that time period, I advocated that we would have somebody working on climate sustainability. So I wish that I could say that was everybody stood up and clapped in the meeting, but the real situation is we are probably going to have to work our ass off over the next 2.5 years and make sure that we have a third vote for that, and which I intend to do.
Okay.
Mute my audio.
Hi, John.
Hey, quick question about percentage affordable units. You mentioned 10% was disgustingly low. I am with you 100% on this. What sort of number would you like to see, or do you think you could pass or get through?
Those are very two different numbers. I appreciate your question, John. So 15% is kind of the standard right now. We've received feedback from our housing department that if you go above 15%, there are other things that get brought into play with the state. I think we get up to 15% now while we can, and then look forward to pushing the envelope as much as we can. I mean, frankly, the way I look at the development, again, it's a gentrifying force if it's not higher. And when we say yes to a development, they are agreeing to be part of our community, and the rules that we set to be part of our community should be agreed upon by the community. So that's kind of my general.
No, that's, as long as I got the floor, I want to ask one more question. You mentioned, you hit two things that I really resonate with. One was the affordability percentage. The other is tree canopies. How do we handle the irrigation water requirement versus what you and I would love to see, which is a lot more street trees?
That's a great question. And I hear, again, I am happy to not be the person that answers questions. So that's cool with me. Like, I love it. And I don't need to be the expert in everything. I need to make sure that I have people that are the experts in everything. Diane brought up that we want to make sure they're native so they can survive in the native environment. So that's a really important piece. Other than that, I would refer to more of the experts. While I love gardening, it's one of my favorite passion and like quiet places to be. I do kill things from time to time. So I don't want to be in charge of all of the maintenance necessarily for the trees either. Oh, hi, Joe.
Howdy. Thanks for joining tonight. I have two comments. Number one, I would recommend or urge the city to form an environmental commission, sort of like the Parks or Planning Commission, but environmental. Get citizens involved in helping with the CAP and with environmental issues and providing input to the city on a regular basis. And number two, with respect to grants, one that struck me, I just learned about recently, it's very impressive, I think, is that in the CCA in the East Bay, in the Bay Area, Hayward and Fremont and so forth, selected 4 cities, got each city to agree to put a microgrid on every city building, got these together in a group of about 20 or 30 microgrids, went out for a grant and got $2 million as a grant to install all of these microgrids by proposing them as a bundle with centralized management. And part of the power of their approach is that they get a power purchase agreement from the equipment provider. The CEA or the CCA manages the microgrids, and the cities pay $0 to get these microgrids on all the city structures. They're so happy with that and the results of that they're now going out for 4 or 5 more cities in their territory, and 50 to 70 or something microgrids in a much larger project. What a wonderful way to electrify city infrastructure, save money, and I mean, not put a financial burden on the cities, and yet get lower prices through the power purchase agreement. So if you don't know about the details, contact the CCA in the Bay Area, in the East Bay, and let's copy them.
Yes. No need to reinvent the wheel. I agree. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Thank you for being here tonight. You've alluded to some of the challenges around climate action in the city. What do you think is a realistic first step, but not too realistic, that people like us should be pushing for?
That's a good question. I really think a lot of this comes from having a staff member that's working on it full time. I think we should be working to get that in our next budget ask next year, and working every angle we possibly can. That may actually be too realistic. Yeah, that's a really good question. Marrying reality with what we really dream for this city is definitely a challenge. So for me, I tend to like dawdle in the day to day on what I can do with trying to keep the vision alive. But somebody to pick up that work as their full-time job at the city will make a tremendous difference. It really will. And it'll take some pressure off the folks that have been carrying that load from our community for so long too. That might provide some extra relief.
Hey, do you have a question?
I just want to speak on behalf of the Sierra Club. Get involved with your local Sierra Club, because I'll tell you, in Carlsbad, we worked for 6 years, 5 or 6 years, to get Carlsbad to help create Clean Energy Alliance. And, we were persistent. But anyway, you can make a difference. And we're a group of 10 people maybe. So, you get out there and you can make a difference.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And the other point about that is 6 years, right? This work is not months, this is years. And hopefully we set it up for many generations to come, but it's going to be a big fight for a handful of years. And the one thing I didn't mention, and I just can't leave this without mentioning the words El Corazon, and the work that was done to put together the plan. It's incredible, and it needs fierce protectors for the long haul too. And so you can definitely consider me one of them. Yes, sir. It's for the digital folks.
Yeah, so for getting somebody full-time in the city to work on something, just got to be careful it's not a contractor, because they may be working for other people, like the people doing the grinds. I'm sure the hotels have a little bit of an undue say, put this park bench, we'll give you 100,000 for it,
Yeah. No, we need somebody on the community payroll for sure.
And I also want to put in a plug for, it's not until next year, but we have a 5-person council, and we do not have 3 votes to do environmental things. But there will be seats open next year, and we'll have an opportunity to change that equation.
This won't be the last time you see me. It's really nice. Thank you again. And feel free to reach out if our office can do anything, whether you're in District 1 or not.
Thank you. as a gift for coming to our meeting and speaking, we have this delightful reusable water bottle, Sierra Club. Help yourself, Eric, please. Yeah, some great ones there. Thank you very much. Well, now I'm going to introduce our featured speaker, Diane Nygaard. And for many of you, I know she needs no introduction, but she's going to get one. Because for over 2 decades, Diane Nygaard has been in the vanguard of many successful environmental campaigns that have shaped North County. Saving El Corazon and the Oceanside Pier and Beachfront from being incorporated into a resort development, for instance. Has anybody taken a walk on the pier recently? Because I know I have, and I didn't have to gain access to that through a multimillionaire's resort. And we have Diane as well as other people to thank for that. Also restoring Buena Vista Lagoon, preventing a mall on sensitive habitat in Carlsbad, and the landmark creation of the Oceanside Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Fund. And many, many more things that Diane has taken action on and led and inspired and motivated many people in North County to get active in. So tonight we get to learn from this expert how we can help to protect our remaining open spaces and how to defend against damaging sprawl development. Ms. Nygaard will provide Diane will provide practical tips and essential strategies based on her successful record as an activist, and we'll have questions for her to answer after that too.
Well, thank you so much, Barbara. I forget. And of course, one person doesn't do any of this stuff. So how my name got associated with them, I don't know. I'm going to pass around a folder with tickle information, some of the things. There's a technical thing in here about some of the laws related to this stuff that will get posted on the website. So you don't even, so look at stuff, click, pass it on. Don't pass the papers individually because then it takes forever, for gosh sakes. Just take the folder, flip through it quick and pass it on to the next guy. Got a few visual aids around here of some of the battles past. But what I'm going to share with you tonight is not the technical CEQA commenting on projects, because the Sierra Club, those of you who want to do that, and as many of us who can need to be doing that, there's 5 one-hour training sessions that are linked on the website. There's also a 2-day session following the Planning and Conservation League model about understanding CEQA that really get into the nit-grit on that. So that covers really the details of how to do these things. What you get tonight is the fluff off the top of my head from the last 23 years about some of the what I found works and some of the things that I see people doing that maybe won't be so successful. To start with, I'm going to say impacting these projects, like a whole lot of other things, is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Do not think that it just happens easily. I'm going to start with a little bit of the inspiration stuff, because you never know where that comes from. And it can be, it's just a thing that just maybe changed the dialogue. It engages more people. It gets the press attention, whatever. But there's sometimes things that just pull that trigger. And people were wondering about some of these visual aids. Why did I bring my cereal with me here tonight? But I remember when that development down at the coast was talking, you were talking about the resort hotels. Joan Bachman stood up in a meeting, and she did this wonderful visual aid that I thought just brought it to life. So if you were building 2 high hotels, and this is the ocean, and you got everybody who lives on this side of them, how much of the ocean can you see through those buildings? Now, if the buildings are oriented like this, how much of the ocean can you see through those buildings? To me, that was a simple visual aid. It was one of those aha moments that if anybody had a brain, they would have oriented the buildings that way. Unfortunately, it didn't happen that way. I think about with the Manchester project and his master plan for another resort hotel and a second resort hotel and golf course on El Corazon. And is anybody in this room or on Zoom, were you at the Coastal Commission hearing where they were hearing the permit for that project? This was a while ago. One was there. Sherry Mackin took 2 busloads of people from Oceanside up to that hearing in Long Beach. And when they got to the Manchester hearing, first the mayor of Oceanside goes up and says, "Oh, what a great project this is for our city." And no, it was not. It definitely was not. It was Terry Johnson. And the city manager gets up and says, "What a great project it is." And then Ann Johnson, who's a folk singer and guitarist, got up there, and 70 people stood up at that room, and we all started singing why we wanted Manchester to go home. And that made an impression on that group. Those are the kinds of things that can really make a difference. For several years, Preserve Calavera did what we called our Have a Heart event. And we would pick the most onerous development that was occurring around Valentine's Day. We hold a community event, and you can go out to that location, and we made Valentines. We brought all the supplies out there. We made Valentines. People did a Valentine for the developer, say, "Have a heart, don't do this or save this or whatever." And then half of them would go to the city council asking them to have a heart. And it's one of those kind of lighthearted ways of doing it. I would talk about the powerful positive message where you can do that. It's a kind of thing that gets press attention, and it engages the community in a different way. Saving the Buena Vista Creek Valley, that was probably a 30-year effort. So many people involved in that over the years. And we had a lot of down points where we didn't think it was ever going to happen. And I remember one of those, the Native Americans connected with our local San Luis Rey band connected with the Rincon band. Ruth Kallick came down, brought some other indigenous folks with her. They held a 3-day healing ceremony on that site, 3 days and nights with a campfire and doing traditional ceremony to preserve that land. I was gifted with some of the tobacco that was blessed at that ceremony. I went to a lot of public meetings over the next year or two on that project and sprinkled a little of that tobacco around as I could. I don't know what made a difference, but somehow over time, we were able to acquire and save that valley. Now I'm going to cue the fish. I told Mark. And now who remembers Coastal Commission hearing in 2008? There had been a major sewer spill along Buena Vista Creek. And as is allowed when the water board sues the developer or whoever is responsible for the leak, you can be charged $1 a gallon for that sewer. You can imagine $73 million it could have been. They never charge a city that amount of money. The city in Carlsbad, it was Carlsbad Vista sewer line that did it. They wanted to do a couple of little diddly projects locally with some of that money, and the water board would let them do that. We said, no, we need more of that money locally. Those impacts were local. We want the money for some local projects that benefit that watershed. We went down to that regional board. When that hearing came up, we had lines of people like this. It was a room 10 times the size of this room. There were 1,700 fish that were killed by that sewer spill. We had 17 lines with 100 fish on each one of them. Many of them were made in this very room by kids coming through the program here. We had school kids doing it. We had people from all over line that room with fish. And do you think that didn't make an impression on that group of folks? And they voted in favor of putting the money into a local project. So you never know what's going to do that. But when you're thinking about these projects, think creatively about what might be that inspiration thing that just kind of might change the way things happen. So that's enough for the fish. Thank you all very much for helping with that. So now we got to talk about the other part of this. So that's the fun part, the inspiration. That really is the fun part. And that can come from anywhere. How about the 99% perspiration? The good, solid, hard work that makes a difference. It's not, it's like a whole lot of things. You get out what you put into it, and it takes a lot of work to make the difference. I always remind people to consider there's two parallel tracks with these things. There's the technical track, getting detailed comments that legally could be sustained, the challenge to CEQA. That's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is the political, because when it comes down to it, in most cases, there's 5 people who are voting. You might have 1 or 2 of them already who might be supportive. So it's going to be 1 or 2 that you need to change to make a difference. So always remember when you're going down this path, challenging a project, to consider both of those tracks and that you're dealing with both of them. You got to build a team. One person never does any of this stuff. Think about the project, who's impacted by it, who is your logical and maybe some bedfellows so you don't normally work together with on something. Get as many people, make sure that people are paying attention to it. There's a whole lot of folks, there's a whole lot of noise out there, but as many people as you can get aware of it and engaged early on, and find the core people who are really interested in this project and who are prepared to put some effort into it. I would say with everything, start early and often. As Eric said, these are year-long fights, and recognize that mostly, what percent of the time do you think we actually stop projects from all of our efforts and activism? It's almost never. I mean, I think of Gregory Landfill, that went on for years. It was stopped. Eventually, it became a business decision for that developer because they spent so much money in fighting it. And by that time, the gaming tribes had the money and they could buy the land, and they did. So the chances are pretty slim that we can stop a project. But what we can do is make it better, make it a better fit with our community, make it less damaging. And that's what we need to be really focused on. Yes, we really want to stop it, but what can we really do? Realistically, looking at the project, what can we really get them to change that'll make a difference and reduce those environmental impacts? And then sometimes what we might want as environmentalists, we're in conflict with neighborhoods. Neighborhoods next to a project might, and I tell you the one issue, what's the one issue that we mostly get in conflict with? What would you think? Well, traffic, we don't like traffic either, but parking. The projects always want, oh my gosh, if you're building 300 units, we got to have 600 parking spaces. And we always look at these things. We don't want to pave paradise and put up more parking lots. We want to get away from our cars. And that really takes an education effort with people to realize we don't just need cars. If we have a multimodal approach, we deal with the bikes and the pedestrians and traffic. We don't need so many cars. If we don't need so many cars, we don't need all of that parking. But we need to work through some of those issues, and we're not always going to be able to come to agreement with people who live around the projects, but try to educate them and bring them on board as much as you can. Okay, so in thinking about doing comments on a project, think about who are we commenting to, what are we commenting, and when are we doing it? So who do you need to get to if you're trying to impact these projects? Any thoughts? The community is one. The developer is a key part of it, and developers, they can be, some of them can be great. I always think of their, the whole continuum. Caruso, I put on the category of like one of the worst ones you think you could imagine. And then we've worked with Sudbury on a couple of projects, including El Corazon over the years. And I have to say they have been one of the best. They really listen to the community voices and input, but they are a key voice. They're going to make a business decision. You need them on board. Your city staff, you've got an assigned planner for a project. They're part of development services. People always get frustrated saying they're just working for the developers. Well, their job department that they work in is development services. Their whole job is to get projects through. But of course, they have to do it in a way that's responsive to the community and listening to those community voices. But there's a whole lot of other staff. Staff go through a whole review in a project. So it's going to be the transportation and the sewer and the land use and everything else. So there's other key staff in the city. I think of the CarMax project that was recently built in Oceanside. Oceanside was planning to do a restoration of Buena Vista Creek along that project, but that developer had not even been informed at all about this project. And so we let the water quality person know. He wrote comments on that project, and we were able to get conditions included on it to make sure that they had to accommodate this creek restoration as part of theirs. So think about it's not just that one planner, but there's other people that you can be interfacing with. Who's going to vote on the project? Planning Commission. Now, these planning commissions will not do individual one-on-ones for briefings, but you can certainly email them as a group and comment and address them. And then who's going to, in many cases, they're the final vote. And then other times it's going to go to the council. But it's a real strategic decision about when you go to the council and who goes to them. And I could tell you, anybody with a brain would never send me to a meeting with Peter Weiss. Just don't do it. We've been like this for years. So when something needs to go to Peter Weiss, I don't go to that meeting, but I can help other people who are going to the meeting and brief them on that. So I remember Alice and Rolf went through training years ago for our North County Open Space group. Power analysis. And if you've never looked at those things, do it sometime. You really go through a thoughtful process of figuring out each of these people who are going to have a key vote on it. Where are they coming from? What are the issues that they're concerned about? How can we connect with them and connect this project in a way that'll work? So think about that power analysis. Think about strategically when you're looking at these council people. And then the other one is agencies. It's not just the city has the ultimate approval of the project, but a lot of projects, big projects, they require permits. So they got to get a permit from the wildlife agencies for habitat impacts. They got to get it from the regional board for stormwater impacts. A lot of times our local wildlife agencies, we think it's a terrible project. It's having lots of impacts. They have limited resources. They do not comment on every project. So if you want to get them engaged, make sure that they know that there's an issue related to habitat or wetlands so that they will put it on their agenda and they will respond on it. Those permit agencies can be a real key. So what kinds of stuff do you want to comment on? Look at there's the volume of comments. So when there's a major big project, you can expect a whole lot of people will be sending in very similar comments, and it's one or two sentences, and mostly what does it talk about? Well, don't do it. Yes, a lot of people, it's as simple as that. This is a terrible project. Don't build it. Is that very helpful to anybody? It's helpful for get a read on the community, but that's really not enough. You want to be specific. You want to give them facts, and you want to provide additional information. I think of Donna on the Breeze project, and the Breeze project was putting solar panels on the outside of the building. And she commented on the draft EIR and said, no, it's going to cause glare and impacts on neighborhoods. We're going to get it in our windows. And what does the developer say? no, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. It was like they always do. And she went to the meeting and she had her facts. She had pictures that showed other projects with solar putting glare on people's house, and she had the research to back it up. So it's not just saying, you know, I don't like this, but giving them, putting some ammunition and research behind it. And guess what happened? What happened, Donna? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, I got the wrong name with you. They ended up, they removed those solar panels from the outside of the building. So you never know what's going to have an impact. And we think about traffic is a big one. Of course, every project is going to generate traffic, but you got to look at some of the details of that. A lot of times they forget particular intersections. There might be a school crossing where there's a particular issue. Bring your knowledge of the community and what the details of that issue are into your comments. That can make a big difference. And then comments can be in writing and verbal. You can put a lot more detail in writing, but there's nothing more impactful than going to those public hearings and being one of those few people, or hopefully a lot of people, who actually stands up and speaks and says what your concerns are, particularly when you've got some of those facts and when you speak from the heart and you're a resident. You're worth 200 people when you go there in person and do that at the meetings. There's also, I guess, we can get into a thing about, you know, how many things you comment on. There's the kitchen sink approach or the very focused approach. Early on, and comments on the Quarry Creek development, I think I set the record for the longest comment letter on an EIR was 62 pages. That got into a lot of minutia, I can tell you, a lot of minutia, something like that. But if you can do that, it's good, because you never know what is the thing that's going to make a difference, particularly if you get down the line and there is a capacity to do litigation. You can only litigate over things that are on the record. So if you don't have it on the record, you can't deal with it later on. And maybe you think something is not consequential, but when it gets to later analysis, it could be the thing that makes a difference. So kitchen sink versus focused. If you can get up, maybe get some other people to do the other parts of the kitchen sink, because that can be pretty tedious. When do you do comments? Early and often. How many of you are on your, what do they call it? Developers conference list, notification list. Do you know what I'm talking about? Before they even file an application, they're thinking about doing a project. They've got just a concept, probably a couple page description. They schedule a meeting with the city. They come in with a few diagrams. 10 city staff are there from all departments, and they pitch their project, and the staff gives them feedback. You want to know early on, what are the projects in the pipeline? If you can get on that list and you can find out about that project early on, and try to nip it in the bud before it even gets to an application. Tell them how terrible you think it is at that point in time and hope that they'll go away. But get on the notification list early on. After that, they'll file an application, and there's a formal CEQA process with notice of prep and DEIR. Numerous opportunities for both written and verbal comments. If you're really serious about impacting a project, try to engage in as many of those steps as what you can through the process. And as Eric said, it's, you know, for any individual projects, it's months. It's typically 2 years from the time they file an application until they get to a project approval. So it's a lot of stuff that you're monitoring for a long time. And I tell you, don't stop once a project has been approved. I think about Calavera Hills Phase 2. We were monitoring that project. We really thought it was terrible. You know, it gets approved anyhow. So out there on the site, the day before, they're allowed to go out and grade it and put up their environmental fencing. Putting up their environmental fencing the day before it was legally allowed. That means chopping habitat down. Not only did they chop it down, but what they chopped, they threw over the fence onto the rest of the habitat on the other side. So you take a few pictures, you send them to the wildlife agencies, and what do you know? They got slapped good on the wrist and they had to do more mitigation of habitat because it screwed up. I think about the Carlsbad Golf Course as well. They, you think a big public funded project, high visibility along major arterial roads. And I was just driving along and I saw, oh my God, they don't have their BMPs to protect the storm drain runoff properly installed. This is a major, they got paid inspectors who go out and look at these things. I'm driving by and I see it's not done right. So again, you take pictures, you send them to the permitting agent, you send them to the staff, copies permitting agency, because they know if the permitting agency knows about it, they're going to be much more responsive to you and fix those things. So your job is never, never done on these bad projects. Let me just kind of mention a few specific tools. Petitions. So how many people have used petitions when you've got a project you're concerned about? So do you think that was effective? Sometimes. Everybody thinks it was pretty good. Well, here's my thoughts on that. I have done it too. I mean, we had some where we must have had a stack, a 22 a page was a stack this big about open space. I finally recycled them a couple of years ago. We never turned them in. We would just go to meetings and we would flash them and say, here, we've got 600 people. Here, we got 800. We never actually turned them in. That probably had almost as much impact as actually turning them in. Now, in the old days, when we used to go out in person and have to collect those individually, it took a massive effort to get those. Now, with social media, a lot of them tend to be done electronically, so you can get a whole lot of them much easier. I think one of the best values for those is creating a database of emails of people that don't like the project. If they'll sign that petition, they're concerned about the project. You can get them engaged. You can get them to be attending and commenting at these critical points. So it has a clear value for that. The other way I've seen them done very effectively, and we did that a few years ago, the Sierra Club booth. It's before the climate action plan had been adopted, and had people at the booth. Everybody did a postcard, not a petition, but they did a postcard. So it had a personal note on it. And we took pictures of those. So we had them. But then when we went to a council meeting, somebody didn't just turn in that whole stack of 200 cards. We had a line of people that went around that chamber turning in a couple of cards. So it had a huge impact. It wasn't just one person turning them all in. It was representative of the community. Well, somebody was selectively reading the comments that people had actually made. So kind of think about it. If you're going to do something like that, how can we do it in a way that really is going to have maximum impact? Media. How many of you have talked to reporters about projects that you're working on? So back in the old days, it didn't used to be too hard to actually get good coverage of some of these things in our local newspaper. How many of you read a daily newspaper? A print copy? Okay. So times have changed, and given where we are today, if your city gets 1 or 2 stories a week, that's about it. So how you make it rise to the top and be that 1 or 2 story that will catch their attention. So it's got to be something that's really newsworthy, figure out a way to make it newsworthy. When we were concerned about one development, you get a Native American out there pulling shopping carts out of a creek. A picture of that will make it newsworthy. Our Have a Heart events, people cared about that. When Sage Creek High School was being built, that huge parking lot that they have around high schools, which are appalling, they were going to get rid of, there were a handful of Coast Live oaks that were left on that site from the early days of ranching. One of them was a heritage tree, well over 100 years old, and they were going to destroy all of them for a parking lot. And we showed them lots of examples of wonderful ways to save parking trees in parking lots, beautiful artistic ways to do that. No, they were just going to destroy that tree. We did a tree naming contest. We got a whole lot of folks involved. The tree was named El Abuelo, the grandfather. And we made a big deal of awarding the winner of the tree naming contest, and that made it into the newspaper. The tree was destroyed, but we were able to harvest it. Pelham College processed the wood. An Eagle Scout project that used that wood to build some shelves and things in the library at Sage Creek High School. So we hope that the memory of that tree still lives on that site some way. But you've got to make it newsworthy. And the other thing I found is how many of you have been quoted exactly correctly in the newspaper? I don't know if that ever happens. One way I found to avoid that misquotes is you don't have to always talk to them just because they called you. You might want to have given them background information, make sure, but they call you specifically and there's something controversial and they like controversy. Just send it to them in writing. If you send them a written quote, they can't misquote you, and focus on the things that you want them to focus on. Because if you talk to them, they can get distracted in who knows what they're going to talk about. Send it to them in writing and don't, you got a better chance getting your story out there. But if you've done these things and you get to the end of the line and the city's approved your project, you've got one recourse you've got is a referendum. How many of you have been involved in referendums? Aren't they a lot of fun? So you've got 30 days to get 10% of the registered voters to sign this petition, and it's got to be written very carefully right. It is a massive job. And I can tell you that is just the first part of the job. The second part of the job is when, if you're successful, goes to the ballot. And then you got to get 50% plus one of the people to vote your way. And I remember with the Manchester project, we were a little grassroots group opposing that. And our message on the campaign was save our parkland, because they wanted to take El Corazon parkland for the second resort because the beach alone wasn't enough. Save our parkland. Isn't that a winning message? And what was the opposition's message? Save our parks. Rocky Chavez was running that effort, and we met with him afterwards. We lost by 41 votes. The community, everybody was behind us. When we met with him afterwards, he said, I knew we could never win on the merits of it. You were right. The only way was to confuse the voters. And so we just used your phrase and turned it, and that's all it took, was to confuse enough voters to vote the wrong way. So that wasn't, that's the kind of things that can happen with a referendum. Okay, she gave me the 5-minute thing. Litigate, and I was going to say, anybody who wants to do a referendum, I probably have collected one of the greatest files of resource material on how to do that, the ins and outs. So anybody is welcome to borrow that folder whenever you want to. Litigation. How many of you have been involved in lawsuits? Is that a lot of fun? No, yeah, the last means no, it's really not a lot of fun. It's a last resort. And that last resort you want to use judiciously. I think I've reviewed, thinking about this over 23 years, hundreds of projects, probably commented on a couple hundred. We've done less than 10 lawsuits. It is a big, massive undertaking. And if you're going to do it, it's best if you decide early on, because I can tell you, attorneys hate for you to contact them. You've only got 30 days from the opinion to when they file. They really want to know earlier. And you want to know earlier, because the key thing is you can only sue over what's on the administrative record. And if you haven't got enough details on the administrative record, doesn't matter how bad the project is, you can't raise any concerns in the lawsuit that haven't been already raised earlier in the process. So make sure that you've done what you can to build that record. And then don't forget, it takes a whole lot of money to do that. So you better start raising money early on. CEQA lawsuits, $50,000 to $100,000. Hopefully you settle. And if they really think you're credible, they will try to settle with you. And big picture. So we can fight projects, project by project. Developer only has to win once. We have to win time and time and time again. So we can't just spend our energy fighting project by project. We need to put the energy into the big picture thing. And I promised Jack that I would mention the general plan updates. San Marcos is going through one, Oceanside is well into theirs. Carlsbad will be starting another update too. Vista is in the middle of theirs. Engage in those. That's where we get the policy and actions that can actually make a difference. So our general plans, our local coastal plans, our climate action plans, those all have a broad implication. So find folks who can join you in dealing with all of those. The other key thing is, was come up a couple of times earlier, is who gets elected. We have to pay a lot more attention to that. I saw some research a few years ago that said Sierra Club people do not vote at any higher rate than the general population does. So if we got a low turnout election of, off-year elections, it's always less than 50% generally. Our Sierra Club members are only voting at that amount. We need to make sure that we're all voting. We need to make sure that everybody that we know that cares about these environmental issues is voting. Don't assume that they are. We've got to make a difference in who gets elected to those offices. So I can guarantee you, absolutely, I can guarantee you, if you put the effort in on any of these projects, whatever you do, you can make a difference. You can shape that project and you can reduce the impacts. You individually can do that. Imagine how much we can do if we all work together on that. So anyhow. So, and I said I'd do some questions. I'll just grab this real quick here.
Yeah, let's have some questions for Diane. Let's try to keep them succinct but please, I know there's a lot of questions out there. And actually, I'd like to start out with, if you could tell us more about one of the referendums.
My sandwich signs. Always advertised. We got signs around here too. Okay, I'm sorry.
And you minored in theater, I can tell. Tell us about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, because it is landmark.
This was a result of our North River Farms litigation, and Paige was not mentioned as being part of the Preserve Calavera board, but Preserve Calavera filed a CEQA lawsuit over that project. Of course, it was good 3 years ago. We spent a good solid 2 years in negotiations over that. That project, like many in this region, instead of mitigating their greenhouse gases locally, what is the cheapest way to mitigate? We don't go projects in the region. We buy into a methane recapture plant somewhere in South Carolina, and they probably sell those credits for, pennies on what they actually should. And there hadn't been monitoring. You have no way of knowing that they're actually doing it. They haven't sold the same credit 10 times. We said, no, these emissions need to be mitigated locally. And that was one of the key issues in our settlement. They finally realized that that was going to be a deal breaker for us. We negotiated on the amount. It was based on the state's cap and trade for greenhouse gases. At that time, it's $25 a metric ton. So that was built into the project. So for every metric ton, and we encouraged them, reduce your emissions. We don't want to make money on this. We want less emissions. So that encouraged them to reduce their emissions, which was, they did a good job of that. But everything left, we got $25 per metric ton. So that's $4.4 million. It's in an account at the San Diego Foundation, and that is being used to fund local projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We hope this is a model that can be done throughout San Diego County, that hopefully some developers will volunteer to do this and not be forced to do it by litigation. But just imagine if all of those impacts we get in projects locally benefiting our community. So thank you for asking that one.
More questions? Anybody here, Paige?
Speaking of greenhouse gas emissions, is there any way in general plans that that can be incorporated into project of, approval?
Well, keep in mind that all projects are required to address their cumulative impacts. And for greenhouse gases, the way they address their cumulative impacts, the easiest way is through a climate action plan that will do that. So that becomes a companion document. When it's linked to the general plan, then it becomes enforceable. It's enforceable mitigation because that's mitigating those greenhouse gas impacts. So in theory, that applies to every project then, because they say you have to comply with the climate action plan, but you got to pay attention to the fine print because a lot of them, they exempt projects. We're looking at some on the VMT analysis. Oceanside set a terrible standard for that. If a project has to can generate 580 T, as long as it's consistent with the general plan, they don't have to do a VMT analysis. If it's not consistent, if it's consistent, they can go up to 1,000. If it's not consistent at 500, well, how many projects generate 580 T? All these small projects, and most new businesses in Oceanside are very small, so they don't have to do any of that. So look at your threshold and the details of what goes into that climate action plan. And then we know some things are really important, like we all love trees. I love trees. We're working real hard. We've funded tree projects through our OGRF, but trees make a really minuscule reduction in greenhouse gases. They got a lot of other community benefits, but not so much greenhouse gases. And I forgot where I was going with that, but your action items, figure out what are the things that really will shape this community. Transportation demand management plans, really obligating development to invest in pedestrian, bicycle, and transit instead of more car-centric approaches. Those kinds of things can make a difference. No, I like to just use a lot of acronyms and sound like I know something. VMT is vehicle miles traveled. And that actually is the new CEQA standard for transportation as of a few years ago. It used to be traffic congestion, level of service. That is no longer the CEQA threshold for transportation because cars in our region contribute over 40% of the greenhouse gases. So they realized they needed to really impact not congestion, but they had to reduce the number of car trips. So the focus is on vehicle miles traveled. So that's a new thing for developers to have to do that analysis. And I can tell you our city staff really don't understand it very well, and they don't do a very good job of figuring out, oh, is this really going to reduce them or not? We have lots of comments on things like that. Is there any other ones that I said that you really thought were ridiculous? VMT, I know, is one of those.
Well, thank you. Not really a question, more like a huge thank you, Diane. I met you before
Manchester.
Yes, when I was running for city council back in 1999. And it's been a wonderful partnership. You've been our resident environmental specialist, our go-to person to look at all those EIR documents. It's been such a wonderful experience with you. And I, in fact, think that we should do a petition to name one of the trails at El Corazon.
Oh, I'm going to tell you something. We fought real hard to not have things named after dead people. So you got to be careful when you do that.
Well, see, you're alive. And I do believe in honoring people while they're still here with us. So you all, I think we just did I guess it's an annual in April, opening the doors, I guess, to application process to name certain, park elements, whatever, after, people. And there's definitely criteria and all. Diane, you hit it all. If we can name a park after Melba Bishop, we can certainly name a trail after Diane Nygaard. And in fact, I think there was a trail named after one of my teachers from
Uh-huh.
Oceanside High, Dean Hienga. Do you all
Oh,
remember Dean
oh.
Hienga? He was my ninth grade teacher.
Wow. wow.
So anyway, we should do that, right? Right? Yes.
That would
Let's
be
start
fun.
that petition.
Is there any? I was looking if there's any. Oh, that's my husband waving at me, I guess. Since
And an important thing here too is the classic threatened and endangered species.
Yes,
You know, the California gnatcatcher started a lot of this, and it was incredibly important.
yes. We were fortunate that we had coastal sage scrub in our North County area when it became a protected habitat. Then, of course, there weren't too many of those developers who went out the night before the law went into effect with the bulldozers and scraped it off their land, unfortunately. But a lot of it's still there.
I think the only regret is that we haven't been able to pass our severity plan,
Yes.
you know, and I don't understand. Before it was just $1 million. But there is money for it, especially now.
Well, especially with a 30 by 30, that kind of funding. And so hopefully, I don't think we can do it with, you know, a 2-3 vote. But we'll do some more education, maybe with our other new guy, and see if there's a chance there to bring that back. Yeah.
You mentioned the cost of lawsuits and also the fact that you need to get things on the record in public comment or written comment.
Yes.
Or you can't bring them up in a lawsuit. One thing that is less expensive is an appeal. And I was wondering if that's the same rule.
Yeah. No, well, on an appeal and depends on what level, how the size of the project, who has the decision authority on it. For the smaller projects, the planning commissions typically do. Very small project, the city planner themselves does it. It doesn't even go to a public hearing. So that's another thing you want to get on a list for those little projects, because then you can challenge those. You just appeal that and then it goes to a planning commission hearing. The planning commission approves a project. You need 25% of the residents in the appealable area around it, or you can pay 1,800 and some bucks, and that gets appealed to the city council. On that, you can appeal on anything that you don't like about the project, but you really want to do it very broadly. You don't want to limit your appeal to just 1 or 2 issues. Make your appeal very broad, so it gives you full latitude to bring up anything you want to at the city council. It gives you a second shot at it. And it gives you a second shot, even if you're not going to be able to stop the project. Maybe there's some specific conditions that you've got a council member that you know they care about that, and they might get that condition thrown on the project and it would reduce the impact. So yeah, I think where you can, doing an appeal is really worthwhile. Hi, Dave. We can't hear you.
Diane, can you mention when an appeal can be made to the California Coastal Commission?
Oh, yes, good. That's very complicated. You need to look at your local coastal plan, which defines the appealable areas. And those were political boundaries. If you look at it, you can't believe how that map is drawn, because it doesn't make sense. It's not strictly so many feet in from the coast. There was a lot of politics about where those lines were drawn. But any project that's within that appealable area has to get a coastal permit. Well, may not necessarily need a permit, but it's appealable to the Coastal Commission. That's another whole separate process. And I forget, Dave, what the time frame is for doing those. He's the expert on that. And very separate forms and procedures for doing it, but they can really, depending on what kind of commission we've got at the time. And since those are governor appointees in most cases, sometimes we've got a really good Coastal Commission, and they're a great place.
I think we need to wrap things up
Yes.
now because it's almost 30.
Yeah.
And thank you so much.
Thank you.
And you also, this wonderful Sierra Club water, reusable water bottle. Hey, and as Oprah says, everybody's a winner because all those succulents and local native plants are waiting for all of us in-person attendees to take some and take them home and plant them. They're low water, they're great. And one other announcement is our next meeting is August 23rd, and Congressman Mike Levin will be our speaker. So put that on your schedule. Please take succulents and plants. Thank you all for coming.